Power was restored very quickly, so I'm happy for that. And hopefully you guys are able to follow along. So we're painting frogs and stones. Okay, and the first part of our job was to get our pencil and to draw a circle-ish shape where we want our frog to be, and the larger that space is, the easier it's going to be to fill it in with your frog later. And then your job after that was to fill in the rest of your canvas space or surface space, wood, paper, cardboard, whatever you're painting on, with other random circles and ovals filling up the entire surface. And we want to make sure that we have spaces no bigger than the width of our pencil. So we want to make sure that those stones and rocks are all really close to each other, okay? So glad you guys were all able to find me again. And sorry for the disconnection. All right, now we can get this show on the road. You just learned your first lesson as an artist, guys. It's all about improvisation. You got to be able to adapt to your situation. Okay. So I will tell you, though, that if you drew a bunch of tiny stones, you might regret that later because you're going to have to paint each of these individually. So make sure that, I tend to do a lot of big ones and then a few small ones. And you can definitely, if you decide, whoo, this is too much work and I made too many little stones, you can combine some of these stones together and fill them in at a later point. So once we have our entire canvas filled in with what is going to be our stone background, we are going to start to use our paint, okay? So the colors that I chose for today are blue, yellow, white, and black. If you have some pre-mixed colors that you want to add in here, you are absolutely welcome to that, but I am going to show you a way to mix colors in, so not to worry. Okay, but your next job is going to be to get your flat brush, paintbrush, and you're going to take some of your white paint, and you're going to just take the tiniest bit of black, and you're going to mix that together to get a very light gray, okay? So you don't need, look, see how much black I'm taking? Not very much. We just want a nice light gray where we're not using a ton of our white paint and not a ton of our black, just enough to make a nice little pool of paint here. And then once you get a gray paint, you are going to take this brush to your canvas and you are going to paint each of these individual shapes that you just created on your canvas. So the gray is going to serve as your base color, and then I'm going to show you how we can highlight and shadow these stones and also how we can speckle them. So when you are painting these in, I like to use roundish brush strokes, so I wouldn't just go straight back and forth or straight up and down. I try and make sure that all of my brush strokes are nice and curved. That way, if you do have any streaks, they follow the curve of the stone and look natural. And don't worry if your edges are not completely crisp, because remember later, we are going to fill the outer edges of our stones with black paint. So if for some reason one of the stones gaps was not big enough, you could definitely come in here with the paint and close that gap and make it a little bit smaller. And if you got a little bit too close and you wanted it to be a little bit wider, when we go in to paint the black paint, you can definitely come in and change that and spread that out. So we're going to do this first, okay? So all of our stones are going to be gray, so don't use up all your white and black. And if some of the stones are a little bit lighter and some are a little bit darker, that's okay. So look, so if I used a little bit more white for this one or a little bit more black for another one, you definitely can do that. If you really want to make it truly like river stones too, you can use different shades of brown. That makes it very interesting, or Yeah, so like dark browns and light browns and medium, and then mix it up by having some that are gray and some that are really dark. And then we're going to add some speckles on top. So don't worry if these are not perfect circles and perfect ovals. We want them to look organic and we want them to look natural. And if you guys have any questions about this process, feel free to let me know. I always tell people that when they're new to painting, the lower you hold your brush, the more control you're going to have over it. And then eventually you will adapt, how you hold your brush according to what you need. But when you're brushing, you also want to push firmly and have your brush slightly angled so that when you lift your brush, you're not leaving any brush marks. If you're pointing your brush straight like this, every single time you make a brush stroke, it's going to leave a little bit of a mark. So if you kind of lay your brush flattish and at an angle and push firmly, you'll be able to lift off without leaving too much of a mark behind. Because we did not prime or seal our canvas, this first layer is going to serve that purpose. And so you may need to add more than one coat of paint to get really good coverage, because some of that paint is going to absorb into the canvas. And so what I like to do is I like to provide a nice thin layer to start, and then if I notice any sort of speckling or absorption, then I will go back to it. We want a thick enough layer that we create a barrier for the other paint to lay on, but we want it to be dry enough so that we're able to apply other layers to it later without it all blending into one big blend, okay? So we're just gonna take our time and paint in all of these stones. So while you're painting in the stones, I want you to take big breaths, and I want you to try and focus just on your painting and relax and concentrate on just getting into the rhythm of the brush strokes and applying the paint and the satisfaction of filling all these in. It's kind of like sitting down with a nice coloring book. And so it'll be really fun to watch your paintings develop as we go. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that not everybody's connection is behaving very well today. So the replay will be available for about a week. And if you missed the replay, but you're interested in painting or you want to check out the other live classes I have available, I've saved all the recorded classes and I have other tutorials and I have placed them on my Patreon account. And so the Patreon account is a cool way that I have adapted to be able to continue to work. And so the subscriptions to the Patreon do help me pay my bills. And so if you are not interested in a monthly subscription to that, you can definitely just, do it one time and check it out and get what you want out of it and then unsubscribe after, a week or a month or whatever. And there's different levels. But everyone that's been involved with the classes and has been tipping through the PayPal and making contributions, I do really appreciate that. And I just want to say thank you so much for all of you for doing that, because that has really helped me and my family be able to get through during this time. I haven't worked full time in almost 3 months. I've been doing these online classes, and then I have been doing commissions and selling paint kits, and I have a few murals and projects and things coming up, but that has really helped us out. So I just want to say thank you to those of you that have been supporting and watching. And if this is your first time painting with me, welcome. And thank you so much also for tuning in. We have a lot of fun when we paint together, and it's so cool for me to see all the different results of different ages and different abilities. And, I just like being able to connect with people. Since I hadn't been able to do that in person, it's really nice to be able to see this community build and see everybody paint and join together here. So again, don't worry if all of your stones are different colors, because we are going to be adding shadows and things to these stones later. So I'm just going to paint a few of these, and then I'm just going to show you how shadowing and highlighting works on some of these stones. So acrylic paint blends best when it's wet. So if you're trying to blend colors together and it's not working, it's either because, so if I put gray on here and I try and blend some white in here, it's either because I don't have enough paint or because the gray paint is dry and it's not wet anymore. So what you can do about that is if you're trying to blend colors, make sure that both colors that you're trying to blend are wet, and if not, reapply some of each of the colors to help that happen. And because these stones are from an up above view instead of from the side, the lighting is a bit trickier, but it's a little bit more forgiving. So that means that we can apply highlights on random spots on different parts of the rocks because they're all different heights and different levels. And so the gray is what we call our base color, and then white is going to be our highlight, and black or darker gray will be your shadow. So once you have your base color on all of these rocks, you can then dip into a little bit of white, and then you can kind of blend a little bit of a lighter section onto a few of these stones. See? So what I like to do is I like to start at the edge and then blend in, and then see if it's not completely blending all the way, I can go back to my gray color and I can kind of blend that in. So here's my light color, and that means that if you have a highlight on one side, you'll have a shadow on the other, okay? So because these are stones, and because this is an upright view instead of a sideways view, we can kind of play with where the shadows and light are. So that means that if you want to play as you're applying the paint, so if you don't want to just do gray and then come in and do the highlights and shadows later, you can take gray or black and white and then partially mix them so they're not fully mixed together, and then you can just apply and then, add white paint or black paint as you go while the paint's still fresh and white. And again, while you're applying the paint all over these stones, it's okay to have streaks and stuff, but I also like to use, like I said, curved brush strokes. That way I'm following, it's showing my viewer that this object is round, okay? And if you're trying to apply highlights or shadows and it's still just blending into one color, it's because your paint is too wet and you need to let it dry a little bit. So it's one of two issues. If it's not blending, it's either because you have not enough paint, or it's too dry, or if it's just blending all into one color, it's because you have too much paint and you need to wait for the paint to be dry. Okay? So see, I can just come back in and add a lighter color on one side, and then see if I add lighter on the top, then I would want to add my darker color along the bottom. So the one thing that we are avoiding is, it's okay to have the curved lines, but we want to avoid what are called hard lines, okay? So this is what a hard line is. Let me show you. So see, if it's like this, if you can see a very, very strong contrast where you see where this stops and that ends, that's called a hard line. And so we want to blend our colors so that we have more of a fade or an ombre effect, where one color blends into the next, so we can get rid of any hard lines. And so how we do this is, when you're blending, instead of just making one brush stroke, you want to make sure that you make your brush stroke and then you go back and forth, but then you want to work down below it and then back up, so that you're merging the two colors together instead of just staying in one area. So hopefully that makes sense to you guys as you're blending, and this will give you a good opportunity to just kind of play around with that as we create the rest of the painting. And if you're just joining in to watch, I'm always open for feedback, guys. So hopefully we're putting on a good show for you if you're just tuning in to watch the process of the painting develop. So I've been painting for over 25 years. I've been doing the paint and sip classes in the area for 5 or 6 years now. And it's a very interesting experience to me to explain the process of what I do all the time, and break it down so that people can understand. But it's made me a better painter. And so because I have to sit and I have to analyze, what am I doing with my hand? Why am I doing that? What are the colors, or how is the paint reacting, or the canvas reacting to what I'm doing? These are all really good questions and things to ask yourself when and while you're creating, to help you to grow. And the other thing that I have learned over time, and that I have told other people too, is that there is no endpoint to your learning curve, guys. For as long as I've been painting and creating, I am still constantly learning new techniques, learning different ways to improve or become more efficient. And so what we do here is I try and teach basic techniques, and then also, give you the foundation for, a good painting. But you can definitely always take your paintings a step further than what I show you. I mean, I'm only doing these techniques in a limited amount of time. A lot of the paintings that I create are definitely not created in just a matter of hours. They're usually created over, multiple days. I mean, I have some paintings that I have, spent weeks on, and some I've, sat 6 hours at a time and created. And so there's never any one right answer for when a painting is done or how long it's going to take, because that answer is different for everyone in the creation process. There you go. So you guys sweating yet? I told you, if you drew a lot of stones, you're going to be painting all those in. Your forearm and your bicep are definitely going to be feeling it afterwards. But you should be very acclimated to using your brush afterwards, because you're using a lot of repetitive brush strokes. So you'll notice as I'm brushing in, I'm not just going back and forth in one place. I'm carrying the paint down through the other areas and then back up. So I'm using the same motion, but I'm also gradually coming down and gradually coming up, and that's what brings all of the paint and the colors together. So I regularly have my daughter paint and create with me too. The classes are not just built and for adults. If you guys have kids that are interested in being creative, but you're not quite sure how to get them started, you can definitely have them sit in on a session, and they can learn how to paint rocks and frogs. Next week we're going to be doing, I have a waterfall painting, and what other paintings are we doing? Oh, we're going to do a bubble fairy. So I'm going to teach you guys how to create a silhouette of a fairy, and we're also going to learn how to create some simplified but fun dimensional looking bubbles. So that's a really popular and fun painting, and you guys can definitely tune in for that too. If you're not sure how to find all of the other events, you just go back to Rembrandt Illustrations main page, and you look up in the menu tab, which is at the top of the page, and then you can actually scroll to the right and you'll find an event schedule. I usually repost the events on my page in my posts, and then I also have a paint group called Paint Nights with Rembrandt Illustration, where you can get updates on classes and stuff there too. So you have to make sure that you like and subscribe to my page so that you can get all the updates, and then follow the events and say you're interested or going, so you get the notification. But yeah. So it's okay if we have different shades of, dark and light on the stone, because we want these to look natural and organic, right? Al natural. Is anyone having trouble painting their stones, or having trouble with blending, or do you guys have any questions for me at this point? All right. Paint, paint, paint. I know it's harder to get questions on this platform because if you want to ask a question or if you're having an issue, you have to put down your paintbrush and then you have to type. The reason why I haven't switched to Zoom classes yet is because you're limited to only a certain amount of people watching, and I want as many people that want to be able to participate or to watch to be able to do that. And so that is why I have chosen this platform for people to tune in and watch. Sure. I gotta wait for my painting to dry anyway, so we're good. All we're doing at this point, guys, is painting stones. And yeah, I am a little bit speedier, but I've been painting for a long time. I will wait and make sure everybody is able to catch up, though. So don't worry, I won't leave you behind. Because once I get all these base colors, I'm going to go back in and play, and I'm going to start to add some highlights and shadows to my rocks. So the other thing that happens when people are adding highlights and shadows to the rocks is they run into the trouble of either adding too much paint to create the highlight or the shadow, or not enough. And we'll go over those things and how to make sure that we're not doing that as we're painting. So if you have too much paint, you will know because you could literally go like this and scoop it off with your finger. So if you can't wipe it off and have a big blob on your finger, you're fine. If you don't have enough paint, you will know very quickly because your brush will not glide on the surface and you will get some speckling. Here, let me show you an example. So if I didn't have very much paint, let me zoom in so you guys can see that here. See how you can see the canvas and it's very rough and speckled? That's because you need to have so an example of too much paint would be that. So if you have big blobs and chunks of paint like this that you can literally scoop off, that means you have too much. And if you can see the canvas up close like that, that means you don't have enough. So what I like to do to make sure I have enough paint is you can dip your brush generously, and then you can wipe your brush on the edge of the canvas just to make sure the brush is loaded, but you don't have any big blobs. And then I push firmly. So you want to push not gently, you want to push firmly into the canvas. That way you're pushing the paint into the surface, and it's going to lock into the fibers and be able to absorb. And then once that dries, then you will create what basically a skin on the surface of the canvas for the other paint to lay on top of. Okay? So that's a good way to find out. So if you're having trouble and you're getting like really rough edges for your rock, if you're getting really rough edges, that probably also means that you don't have enough paint or you're not pushing hard enough. There we go. Can everybody see okay? So you can also, if you run into the issue of, I put too much paint on my canvas, then just take your brush and wipe it off on the edge of your plate or wipe it off on a paper towel and go in with a dry paintbrush and then spread around the excess. Or take it and move it to another area of your canvas. You don't have to just keep painting in one area if it's, causing an issue for you. or just clean off and wipe off your brush and move on to a new spot. And don't worry about if your edges aren't crisp yet, because we're going to fill in the gaps in a sec. So I've had a lot of fun doing these classes. It's been a really interesting interaction to be able to communicate with people not only where I live in Kitsap County in Washington, but in different states and in different countries and time zones. It's really cool to be able to connect with each other on this platform and to be able to see all of you guys come together and create. We need to have more of that, especially in the time in our world and in our history, the way things are. Okay, I'm all about the peace and love and, you know, creating positivity in art. So we definitely need more of that and coming together to do more of that. So I'm happy that we can all meet here and we can all do that. And yeah. Well, if you have too much paint, girl, then wipe off your brush and run a dry. So what you can do is, if you were really scooping the paint on there and you had too much paint, just wipe your brush off on a paper towel and take a dry paintbrush. So see, take your brush, clean it off so you have no paint on it. Okay, none. And then just run a dry brush over your canvas, over the areas where you need to blend it out. You can also use your paintbrush. Like if I had a ton of paint, watch this, guys. Oh, there's so much paint. Whatever will I do? Wipe your paintbrush off, okay? And then you can literally push firmly and wipe and just scrape some of that paint off. And then you can blend the remaining paint. And so if you don't have very much paint, you might be surprised how well it will blend. Just push firmly against your brush and then drag it back and forth, and see how we can just spread that out. Where there is a will, there's a way, guys. I always have an answer. So if you feel like your painting is far gone or you're having an issue, let me know. I have a solution for you. Guarantee. You can also get out a hairdryer or pick up your canvas and start fanning it in the air, and that will also help that paint to dry. The thicker the paint, the longer it's going to take to dry. So this is why you want to run your brush over the spaces multiple times. Oh yeah, I'm going to talk about shadowing and highlighting again now. So I'm just going to finish up my last stone here, and then I'll talk about that again. Don't worry, guys. I'm going to repeat myself incessantly. Okay. So I have all of my stones done, and I know not everybody is there yet, and that's okay. But I'm just going to talk about how to highlight and shadow. So here, let's look at the original painting one more time again. Okay. So here's the original. So you'll notice that we have our base color of light gray. And then in some areas, the stones are darker, see, darker and then lighter. So what you will notice is that, see, if I did a dark area on this stone, I want to make sure that it's lighter on this side. If it's darker here, then I want it to be lighter on the opposite side. If it's darker here, I want it to be lighter on the opposite side. It doesn't have to be super dramatic, guys. It just has to be a little bit darker just to create shadow. So if you have your gray already on there and you just add a tiny bit more black to it to make it a little bit darker, see, I can start at the edge of my stone and I can, you know, wipe in some gray or darker area. And if it's too dark, like I went, whoa, that's a little crazy, and I want to blend it out, just add a little bit of white to your brush. And then what I do is, in the area where there's a hard line, I run it between the two colors. Okay? And then I'm able to blend that out. And don't be afraid to do a second coat of paint. If you need to do a second coat of paint to get it covered up, do that. That's okay. You're allowed to do that. So I like to add a little bit more white paint on my brush to the opposite side and then blend that down. So I do the dark edge first, blend up and in, and then I do white on my brush and then blend down, and then I'm able to see, but I'm still using my curved brush strokes. I'm still using my my brush and going back and forth. And like I said, don't worry about the smooth edges. It doesn't have to be perfectly symmetrical because they're rocks. So again, and if you do a shadow on this rock here on the bottom, it doesn't have to be on the bottom of every single one. Like I can choose to do a shadow on the right side instead of this one, okay? So see, that's nice and dark on that side, and if I want it to be less dark, I can take white paint, start on the opposite side, okay, and then start to blend it, and because both of those colors are wet, they will blend together. See? So the gray is serving as our base color, and then the white and the darker gray or the black are using our second coat of paint, and they're our highlight and our shadow. See, so it's okay to repaint over. Don't worry about if your first layer is not perfect and your second layer doesn't have to be either. It's nature, guys. We're just having fun. So it's okay if you have some streaking lines on your rocks. It's okay if you know, they're not all exactly the same shape. We don't need them to be. Okay, but see, I use the darker color on one side and I bring it up towards the middle. So I start on the bottom, back and forth, and I push towards the middle. Okay, and then I use white on the other side. So see, I can trace. Okay, and then I can start to blend that down towards the black. Okay, and then I can come back up. So I go down, up, down, up. But I'm using curved brush strokes as I'm going back and forth, and push firmly. If the colors are not intermingling, it's because you're being too delicate with your brush. And if it got too dark and you want to make it lighter, just add a little bit more light gray or white to your brush. See? And we don't have to add shadows and highlights on every single rock either. I mean, you can just do it on, you know, every other one just to give a little bit more emphasis in a few areas, just to make things interesting, just to make it so that they're not all exactly the same. See, I started with dark on this side, and I start at the edge, and then I go back and forth and bring it to the middle, and then I bring a lighter color on this side, and then I bring it so that they're touching, and then I can blend those colors together because both of the paints are wet, okay? They will not blend together if they're both not sticky, okay? So what I mean by wet is not add water. It means that they're both still fresh and flowing on the canvas, okay? So we can continue to do this all over the surface, okay? So I can add a shadow on the opposite side if I want. Okay, I can make it bigger. So I start along the edge, and then I go back and forth and start to blend towards the middle. And I'm keeping the curved lines, okay? Take a lighter color on the opposite side, okay? And then start to bring it towards the middle. If you don't have enough, get some more, okay? And then you start to blend those colors together. Okay, and if it's too dark, what do we do, guys? Add white. And that's how we get those going. And the lines don't have to be perfectly smooth too. If you miss part of the edge, that's okay. Just have fun. So the idea here is they're all gray stones. And then some of them are going to be a little bit darker on one side and some are going to be a little bit lighter. That's it. But we want them to be connected. So we want it to merge. We want it to go darker to lighter, not just all of a sudden have this hard line. Okay? So if you are just now tuning in, guys, it's never too late to start. All we did, and I'll go back over the steps, our supplies that we needed were, we just needed a pencil, a small flat brush, a toothbrush, the colors blue, yellow, white, and black, a water bowl for cleaning our brush, some paper towels or a paint rag to clean everything off, and a surface to paint on, okay? So I'm going to go back to the original painting just so you guys can see, okay? So what we're doing right now is we drew all of these large ovals and circles all over our canvas, you know, leaving small spaces between each stone. We did a base color of a light gray over all of the stones. And then the next thing that we're doing is we're just adding some shadows and highlights to each of those stones. And so I am leaving these stones a little bit darker than the original because I want my speckles that I'm going to show you guys to show up better. So when you add the highlights and stuff to the stones or the shadows, you can spend all day doing that. But unfortunately, my friends, we do not have all day. We have a few short hours in the afternoon. So I will give you the basis for how to create most of your masterpiece. And then if you want to go and continue on into the wee hours of the night, then please go forth and do so. I encourage you. But the replay will be available and up for about a week afterwards. And you guys can come back in and watch the replay and hear me talk about how I lost power and disconnected for like the first 5 minutes. And then we got back to business, right? So, does anybody have questions about where we're at so far? Can I do anything to assist anybody? So again, now that some of that paint has absorbed, you may notice that you want to come back in and create, you know, some second coats of paint. But also remember that when acrylic paint is wet, the more you run your brush back and forth over it while it's wet, the better it will blend. Oh, also, I noticed that I had some scammers on my page. If you have somebody offering to buy you tickets or sell tickets to one of my events, they are trying to rip you off, and don't pay attention to that, because all of these events I have put up online are free of charge. I am not charging anyone to participate in these events. So if somebody says they have tickets they want to sell you, tell them what they can go do with those tickets. So I've put the events up for free, and I do have a ticket link on there with my PayPal link, and all that is for if you guys are working and you're able to make a contribution, or you want to, and you feel like this class has brought value and you just want to say thank you, that's just there if you want to make a tip. It's not necessary. I want everybody that's able, that wants to paint to be able to paint. The classes are free if you've already got supplies. I do have paint kits for people if they want to buy paint kits and they live in Kitsap County. But the ticket link that's up there is only if you want to make a tip to me to help keep classes going or say thank you. If somebody tries to offer to sell you tickets, no. I've had to delete a few of those posts, especially when we get up in the higher numbers of interest for events where people are posting and trying to, I don't know. Does that mean I've made it, guys? Does that mean I made it when people are trying to sell fake tickets to my free events? I don't know. You tell me. Yes, we get scammers here, even on Facebook, even for free painting events. I've made it, guys. All right. So we could shadow these forever, but I'm going to have to call it at some point and say, nope, we're done now. And so what I want to hear from you guys is if you feel like you are at a point where we can move to the next step where I can talk about it, just hit that thumbs up button so I know that I can move on to the next step. Let me see some hearts and some thumbs ups if you're ready to move on to the next step. If I need to hang out for a second, I'll hang out. Just let me know. See here, guys, arbitrary. They're just arbitrary brush strokes. We're just playing. We're just having fun. They're not hyper calculated. They're just, we're just playing. Okay. So I'm just going to talk about the next step. And if you guys are still painting the other stuff, that's okay. We're just going to talk about what to do next. And when you are ready, you can move on to that step. If you're not ready now, that's okay. All right, let me add a few more highlights. I'm being messy too because I know I'm going to paint over all this stuff on the outer edge later. Okay. So here's all my stones. Here's all my stuff. I'm going to clean off my little paintbrush for now, and I'm going to put that to the side, and then I'm going to use my toothbrush. If you don't have a toothbrush and all you have is your paintbrush, I'll show you how to use your paintbrush for that also, but I'm telling you guys, the toothbrush is the way to go. I just stole one of my kids' old toothbrushes. I cleaned it really good so I didn't get her cooties in it. But yeah, I just have a little toothbrush here, nice firm bristles, because when you put paint on this and you either rake your pointer finger like this or your thumb through it like this, it's going to splatter all over the canvas. So the key here, guys, is wherever the top of the brush points, that's where the paint's going to go. So don't point it towards you or it's going to go in your eye. Don't point it to the side or else it's going to get your glass. Don't point it up. It has to be pointed straight at the canvas. So see, it's like this, straight. This, my hand is the canvas, straight. Okay, so this is what I'm going to do. Once I have all my stones laid out and I've put down my little paintbrush, I'm going to take this toothbrush and I'm going to tap it into some white paint. Okay, so see, I just got enough just to get it onto the bristles. Okay, and then I'm going to dip it once into my water bowl and I'm just going to tap until no drips of water come off of that. I just wanted to get the paint a little bit wet. Okay, and then I'm very quickly either going to use my pointer finger or my thumb to splatter the canvas. Okay, so what this is going to do is I'm going to add those speckles on the stone. So if you did, instead of gray, if you wanted to do river stones with like a few brown, ones in there, this will still work. You can use brown as part of your splatter if you want to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do white for part of it, and you can do as much or as little as you want. It's up to you. Okay. I like the drama, so I want a lot. Okay. Make sure it's all over your canvas. And then once you do the white, you're going to repeat that step with black paint. So you want to dry off your toothbrush to make sure there's not a ton of water on it. See, now I can put black on there. Same thing. Dip. See all those drips? We don't want those drips. It's really important that you just barely get it wet, because if you splatter onto your canvas and there's lots of water, then that's going to drip and it's going to run down your canvas. Okay, So that's why we don't want to do that. Oh, by the way, did I mention you're going to get paint on your fingertip? Yeah, sorry about that. So see, I can speckle. So if you wanted to make more like granite, you could use like a metallic paint. You know, you could drop some glitter on here just to get, you know, how like granite has some kind of sparkly splatters on there. That would definitely be a really fun thing to do. Like I said, you could use different shades of brown, or you can, you know, do the rocks different colors. But yeah, so you can add as much or as little of this as you want. I like to do a lot because I think that makes it more interesting, more fun. See my finger? If you just got your nails done, acrylic paint is washable. You'll be able to wash it off. Or this is how you can do your nails from now on. You're welcome. There you go. Maybe I should do all the other fingers so that I match. What do you think, guys? Do I look beautiful? Anyway, so there you go. So there's that. And then if you don't have a toothbrush, you can still use your paintbrush to do the same thing. You would just use your pointer finger to quickly pull the bristles. And if you have like a really rough bristled brush, like a short bristled, rough bristle brush, that works really good too. Like the stiffer the bristles are, the better. That's why I said using a toothbrush works really well. But yeah, so you can speckle away, speckle to your heart's content, have a blast, use different colors if you want to play with different colors. And then after you are done with the splatter technique, you are going to fill in all of the white with black paint. Okay, so that means that I'm going to go in and I'm going to start to paint all of this black. Okay, so if you have a tinier brush and that works better for you, definitely use that. If all you have is the little flat brush, use the sideways. I like to use the sideways edge. So that means instead of laying my brush flat like this, I turn it so that I get the edge, and then I push very firmly as I'm going around the edges of the rock. And you should get nice crisp edges as long as you have a good amount of paint and you're pushing really firmly with your brush, okay? And you still want to make sure that those areas are smoothed out too. So just because you've gone around the rock doesn't mean that you shouldn't run your brush over the paint multiple times just to make sure that it's nice and even and nice and smooth. And if you have a smaller brush and you want to use that, cool. And if you just have this one, we can improvise, okay? But see, so I'm nice and careful. And then if for some reason you accidentally made your, black paint too big and you need to go a little bit smaller, you can always come back in with the gray paint and you can redo a stone or something. So don't worry if you accidentally overlap too much, okay? But yeah, so this is the part that's going to take your concentration, because you are now going to go in and then carefully fill in all of these edges. And you can kind of reshape some of the stones this way too. So if you didn't particularly like how round one was and you wanted to kind of make it a little funkier shape, you can definitely come in and, make it a little different. So don't feel like it has to stay exactly like it was before. You can definitely play with that. Just make this painting your own. And then the last step is going to be after this. We're going to paint all this black, and then you guys are going to learn how to make the ferns and the little froggy. So if you have a scrap piece of paper, to practice on for those parts, like for the fern and the frog, now would be a great time to get that, so that when you're done and this is dry, we can practice on a scrap piece of paper. Or if you're a wild one and you want to walk on the wild side, you can just paint right on the canvas like I'm going to. And also make sure that your stones are dry, because if the gray paint on the stone is not dry, then the black around the stones is not going to work very well. So just remember that too. And then if you're just watching, just for watching, you have to sit there and hypnotically, pay attention to just all I'm doing at this point is filling in gaps. And if you guys have questions about how to do that more effectively, or you're running into issues, just make sure you let me know. And if you're just watching, Feel free to jump off, like, and subscribe to Rimbert Illustration. Follow us on the Instagrams. Keep up on all the stuff that we're doing, because we're flying through all of these new county stages for business, and we're going to be back out there and doing events in no time. In the meantime, not only have I been doing these remote classes like this, but I've also been doing like company parties and, birthday parties and things for people online. So if you know somebody that's having a birthday and trying to come up with a creative way to celebrate and meet together, we can still do that remotely. So if you guys have questions about that, feel free to let me know. I'll see if I can help you. And remember, for you newbies, the lower you hold your brush, the easier it's going to be to control those bristles as you're trying to pull it around. If you're way back here, you're going to have a harder time balancing your brush and trying to get, crisp edges. Oh, I should have reminded you, if you have a stretch canvas, I just have a canvas panel, so my canvas is completely flat. But if you have a stretch canvas, make sure that you're painting on the sides of the canvas too. Or if you want to be different, you can paint blue on the edges and make it like the rocks are surrounded by water or something. Somebody had asked earlier, they said, was green not a requirement for the colors that we needed? And green is definitely needed in this painting, but I will show you a few different ways to mix your own green with the color combinations I provided. So if you have a basic knowledge of mixing colors and primary colors, you know that blue and yellow makes green, but there's also different ways to make different shades of that. I'm going to show you guys how to do that. All right, we've had pretty good luck with the live streams on Facebook. In the last several months, there's only been a few instances, very few, like maybe 2, where I've had trouble connection issues. So, and then when the replay happens, you don't even see those connection issues. It just connects all of it all together. So. All right, we're getting there. So it's very easy to smooth out the edges and change the shapes of the stones, or if some of the gaps were too small and you wanted to make them bigger. And the advantage of using contrasting colors is that if for some reason I didn't like something I did in the black, I could wait for it to dry and I could come back and I can add more gray and reshape some stuff. It's very, very easy when we're doing things this way to make adjustments. So you have got waterfall and bubble fairy coming up next. So I've been doing at least one broadcast a week for almost 3 months now, which is just wild. I missed the frowny face. That's okay. Good. Yes, please share your results. It's so fun to see the families and the kids getting together and doing stuff. People have been sending me shots of their setup at home, and that's really cool. You know, you get to be comfortable and in your own space, wearing PJs, getting munchies and drinks, and that's cool. That was one thing about the events in person that are a little bit different. So when you're painting in public, you're doing that with strangers, and the business is open and there's other people walking by. And so it's definitely a different experience on both ends. I will be looking for some all-age venues to be doing stuff in, though. So if you guys have suggestions and you live in Kitsap County like I do, I live in Washington State, and you know of a venue that would be really good for an all-ages event like this when we get back to business, then feel free to send me a message and let me know, because I'll be making my schedule, through the fall. In the winter and the fall, not only do I do the canvas painting classes and stuff, but I also do a lot of window painting. And if you live in our area, you may have seen some of my stuff, but that's my busiest time of year. I start booking people in October for window painting in December and stuff, because people want their holiday windows painted, and then I run out of space on my schedule. The first year that I was super busy painting windows, I painted like 200 windows in like 2 weeks. And windows are big, guys. They're not like painting a canvas. You're painting, for hours and hours using very large arm movements, because you're painting really large spaces. And you're in the cold, so it's a different beast than painting on canvas. But it's really fun, and the result is really, it really makes an impact, and so I really enjoy and I'm happy to be able to do that with and for people. Getting closer. I'm getting closer. Starting to fill in. Right on, Jennifer. So Jennifer, and for those of you guys that are tuning in now or maybe missed the beginning of this, I started one live feed, and we started to paint, and then I lost power or lost connection, and Facebook cut me off. So there will actually be 2 videos. All of the information you need is in the second video, this one. But if you're watching the replay, just make sure that you check both. And then if you, like I said, if you join the Patreon, all the videos that I take off are saved in a catalog there. And then I also have like free coloring pages and other little tutorials that you can follow along with and do. And you can do those at your own pace. So that's kind of cool. We're getting closer. How are you guys doing? What I notice too is sometimes you have to have patience when you're painting through, and sometimes people will really get into this and get into the rhythm of doing the repetitiveness and like filling in the gaps, and it's truly satisfying. And other people are like, I'm so impatient, I just want to get through this. Can they just they start out doing everything smooth and then they start barreling through because they just want to be done. And so don't rush. Take your time. Relax. Because again, this is the first layer of paint you're putting on that white. You may notice as some of the paint dries that you need to add a little bit here or a little bit there, so you can come back in and do a second coat. And make sure that you're not just doing one brush stroke. You may have to go over the paint multiple times to make the paint nice and even and smooth, and to truly push it into the canvas and make it even. And that will also, running your brush over it multiple times, will also help that paint to dry more quickly. So you're doing multiple things. You're pushing the paint into the canvas to lock it in and create that skin. You're smoothing it out to make the paint more even, and you are helping it to dry so that we can move on to the next layer, which is creating all of those green ferns and that cute little baby frog. Or toad, or whatever you want to call it. And so when we work on the next part, I want, if you guys have a scratch piece of paper, you can pull that out so that we can practice the steps that we're going to do for the next part. And if you don't have a scratch piece of paper, you can always turn your canvas around. You just want to make sure that the canvas is dry, of course, before you do that. All right, outside eyeballs, you guys are watching. Am I done here, or did I miss a spot? What are you seeing from the outside? And how are you guys doing? Are you ready? Got a little glare. Let's see if I can get rid of that glare a little bit. Ooh. It's wild and crazy up in here. There we go. There we go. So if the paint's really wet, you want to take your brush and see, just take a dry brush and then run it over the spots where it's still really shiny or really lumpy and thick, and help spread that out so that it becomes nice and even. Yeah, no worries. We're not in any hurry to move on to the next step. I'm a speedy painter. I've been painting for a lot of years, so I'm probably a lot faster. And everybody paints at their own pace. So I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page. We're all, able to get through and nobody's rushed. And yeah. So when and or if you're done with this, you can dry off your brush and then just run your dry paintbrush over all the little wet spots to kind of help even out the paint, and fan it, or you can pick up your canvas and fan the air and help it dry, or you can bust out a hair dryer. And when I'm painting murals, I use a battery powered leaf blower, and that helps me to dry the paint on the glass. I don't suggest using a leaf blower for your indoor painting though, so don't do that. There we go. All right, so I'm going to clean my brush off, and I'm just going to wait for you guys to catch up. I'm going to get some scratch paper and get my supplies ready for the next step. You will need your pencil, the clean paintbrush, and like I said, you'll need a scrap piece of paper. So I'm just going to show you what this painting looks like here. Here's the original. Okay? And there's the one that I've created with you guys today. How's everybody doing? How many of you guys have done other paint classes on other sites? How many paintings do you think that you have done in the last several months? Is this your first time painting, or do you paint on a regular basis? Oh, you guys are so cute. Very cool. No need to wait for you. Well, I'm sure other people need me to wait for them too. Give me thumbs up if you're ready to move on to the next step. Because what I'm going to do is I'm just going to set my painting off to the side. Actually, here I don't need to even set it to the side. I'm just going to take this and put a little piece of paper right here. Okay? So we're just going to talk about how to create the ferns and how to create the frog. And so when we create the ferns, what's going to happen is you are going to use your paintbrush. So let's see, if you have a smaller detail brush, it definitely does make things a little bit easier for painting the ferns than if you have the flat brush, but you can use both. Here's my little tiny, this is called a round brush, and that means that it's not as flat. So what I want to do is you can do one of two things. You can take blue and yellow and you can mix together a green, okay? And the thing about this green is, although it's very pretty, it's a little bit translucent, okay? And so if you want to make it slightly darker, let me zoom in so you guys can see. Look, if I just touch just a tiny bit of black, I can mix that with my paint and it will make that green darker. See, did you guys see how much I did? I just barely touched it. So I used blue and yellow, mixed that together, and then I just used a very tiny touch of black to make a darker green, okay? Or you can add a little bit more blue to it also, okay? And then once your brush is really saturated, this is how we're going to do the ferns, okay? So you would start on the side of the canvas somewhere and you would paint a curved line coming up, okay? So obviously this is the first time that you've done these ferns, so I would start with just a small section so that if you want to make bigger ferns later you can, but just do a tiny little one to start so that it doesn't take over your whole canvas immediately, okay? And then you can build them up. And then I'm going to take a little bit more, so I'm just going to roll my brush into some paint just to make sure I have a good amount, okay? And so I'm going to start from the tip of the fern. This is the stem, the center stem, and I'm just going to touch and pull to the line so that I have a little like upside down teardrop right there. And every single time I do a little leaf for the fern, I'm going to start out and away. So once I make this little teardrop, I'm going to do another one underneath and pull towards the stem, underneath and pull towards the stem. So I have 1, 2, 3, and they all start towards the outer part of the stem. And you may need to keep reloading your brush. If you don't get a good brush stroke, it's probably because you don't have enough paint. And so we want to maintain like the tip of this little fern, so maybe you can add like a second little section right there so that it stays narrow. And then you're going to create 2 little short stems off to the sides at an angle. See, they're going to be just a little bit wider than these here, okay? So I'm going to take those, create 2 angled lines coming down, get more paint on my brush, and I'm going to repeat the steps that I did here, but on these stems. So I would create the upside down teardrop here, and then I can go 1, 2, 1, 2. Okay, and then I can do the same thing on this side. I can create the teardrop, 1, 2, 1, 2. So again, I always start from the outer edge because this is called a round brush. So that's where the biggest part of your brush stroke is going to be. So I kind of push firmly and then I use less pressure as I come to the middle. Okay, and then I'm going to leave about a 1/2 inch of space. I want to make sure I leave some room, and I'm going to draw some more angled lines, and these ones are going to be just slightly longer than these ones. Okay, so the reason why I want them to be just slightly is we want our fern to gradually get wider as we come down, and then you can repeat these steps, but obviously you'll do some more petals. So you could go 1, 2, 3, and then see 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and then you can repeat on the other side. So if you happen to make this line too long, then instead of starting above the line, you can start your little teardrop on top of the line and bring it in so that it's a little bit shorter. See, but I always start away and pull in. And you'll notice when I make the petals also of the leaf that instead of making them just straight out, these lines are angled and my leaves are also coming in at an angle. Okay, so then I would move to the next step and I would make another long line, another long line, and then if you get to the edge of the canvas where there's no more left, then you can just create your leaves on this side, see, instead of on both sides, because that part's not sticking out anymore. Okay, so I start with the base color of green, and then if and when this dries later, I can add highlights to it. So I'm going to do this on my canvas now so you guys can see what I mean. So you can place these ferns, and like I said, it's very important. I like to mix the yellow and the green together, but also take a tiny bit of black. And the reason why I do that, guys, is because green is kind of a translucent color, which means it's a little bit see-through, and so you won't get good coverage on the canvas if you don't have a good mixture of paint. Okay, so I got my green, and then you can add ferns wherever you want. So on the original painting, see, I kept them along the bottom edge. So I did some over in the corners here, and then along the bottom here. But again, you can make them wherever you want. So if you would prefer to have some along the top edge, you can definitely do that. I like to make them different heights, so to make the painting more interesting. So see, if I wanted to add a fern here, I would make my line like that. Okay, and then I would make my teardrop at the top, 1, 2, 3. Okay. And then I would do another one underneath that just to maintain the point. Okay, and then I do 2 angled short lines coming down. And I want to make sure that I leave space between these little petals and these lines so that when I create these leaves, they're not overlapping those ones. Okay? We want to make sure that we have positive and negative space. That means we want to make sure we leave room around the outside. Okay? And then I would go down about 1 inch or so, and I want to do a parallel line. So this line is going to be parallel to this one, and slightly longer, not much longer. Okay, don't worry about if the line is perfectly straight or not. And then I will do my 1, 2, 3, always starting from the outer edge and pulling in towards the stem. Okay, and the reason why I always start outer edge and then come in is because watch what happens. So if I create a line and then I pull out, then you will get a point rather than a rounded edge. And so those are 2 different types of brush strokes. So if you were wanting to create a point, then you would start from the stem and pull out. This also, by starting at the outer edge and pulling in, gives you more control of how big you want your little fern leaves to be. So if you want them to be very, very short, then you start very, very close to the stem. And then if you need to make them longer, you can always go out and make them longer than that, okay? And then you just keep going down the canvas, and so this gets bigger and bigger as you go down. But you don't want it to get too big too fast. You just want this to be gradual as you're working your way down, so that it's kind of like, so see, this could be kind of contained within a triangle. Okay, and again, like I said before, this color will be dark at first, and then once this dries a little bit, you can come in with a lighter color, and then you can add a little bit of a highlight to your foliage. So I'm just going to do a couple of ferns while we're hanging out here, so I can add them in different areas so you can see. So if I wanted to add one in the middle, I can have one come off to the side, and they don't have to be a straight line either. You can make them nice and curved so they're a little bit more natural and organic. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2. 2 little angled lines. Always starting from the outer edge, pulling in, making sure that the leaves are at an angle. Nice and gentle. You don't have to push too hard. If you have a good amount of paint on your brush, you should get good coverage on here, and you shouldn't need to push too hard with your brush. So if you mix that dark color, you can also do this. So if you're mixing the dark color and then you touch the yellow also, so that you have both on your brush, and then you start to apply, it will also add a natural highlight to your paint. So you can do that as you go, or you can wait for your fern to dry a little bit, and then you can just come in and add little bits of yellow just to the upper edge of your leaves. Or through the stem, just to add a little bit of contrast. So if you run into the issue again of too much paint, what I like to do when I'm dipping is I tend to dip into the paint and then kind of wipe my brush off so that I have lots of paint on, but there are controlled amounts on the brush. So if you have a big blob on the end, that can tend to get away from you, so you have to be careful with that. And then you can continue to apply until you run out of paint and then get more paint. That's the other thing is when people are painting, sometimes they continue to dip and add too much paint, and it's better to just use what you have on your brush until you can't anymore, and then come back in and get more paint. Does anybody have questions about the ferns so far? I'm glad to see some new people here, and thank you so much for joining me. There we go. So see, you can add as many or as few of those as you want. I suggest doing at least 3 just for, just for interest and to have a little variety happening in your painting. Don't just do 1 and be done. And what I like about this too is if your black and your gray is all dry, then these should go over the top of them very nicely. With acrylic paint, as long as the paint is dry, you should be able to paint right over the top of it, and it looks like it's in front. So this way we're able to add some nice dimensional layers to our piece. to give it a little depth. Add a little bit of color so it's not all just black and gray and white. So the other shade of green that you can make too, and I use quite a bit when I'm painting, is if instead of using blue, you just take yellow by itself and then you mix it with a tiny bit of black, and that will give you kind of an olive shade. So if you don't like the color that you're getting when you mix the blue and yellow together with a little bit of black, you can mix yellow with a little bit of black, and that will give you more of an olive tone. All right. So there we are for the ferns. And like I said, once you know how to do those, you can stop and you can come back in and you can definitely add lots more of those to your painting. So I'm going to show you guys how to do the little froggy. And then, like I said, you can come back and make more ferns if you want to. But I just use yellow once the paint is a little bit dry, and I come back in and I run it through a few of the leaves or down the stem just to add a little bit extra pop. When you have multiple color tones happening, especially when you're painting plants and things, it really adds more dimension than if you just have one solid color. One solid color gives more of kind of a graphic look, and so there we go. All right, so I'm going to clean off my brush, and I'm just going to talk about how to make the little frog that we had sitting on the rock. So here's the original painting again. We're just going to go back to this just so I can show you guys what that looked like here. So I laid some ferns along the bottom, but like I said, you can definitely add some along the top here. And then I had you choose at the very beginning of when we started our painting class a stone in which you wanted to place your frog on. So I put mine up here in this corner, and I chose a rock in a similar spot. But if you decide you like this rock better or one up in the corner, you can definitely do it there instead, okay? I'm going to show you how to paint my frog directly on the rock, and then you guys can, practice it on the paper first and then decide from there, okay? So this is the rock in which I'm going to paint the frog. I'm going to use the green that I pre-mixed for the ferns, or you can use, like I said, the yellow and the black to make more of an olive tone, depending on which color you prefer. Make sure you have enough of it, though, so that you're able to get what you want, okay? And then what I'm going to do is where I want the main part of the body of the frog to be, I'm going to paint a circle, okay? So I want to leave enough room around the rest of the circle so that I have room to make the little legs and things, and then also have room for the head of the body. Okay, but see, I just painted a circle, and it doesn't have to be a perfect circle, so don't worry if it's not. Okay, so I did a big circle here, and then I'm going to paint a smaller circle connecting to this one so that it looks like a filled in 8. Okay, so I'll bring this up close so you guys can see that a little bit better. Okay, so I'll paint this like this so you guys can see up close better. Okay, so I painted a circle here, and then I painted this one, and I want it to be slightly smaller, but not so much smaller that my frog has a little pinhead. So let's make sure that that's there, and then you have plenty of room around the outside for arms and legs, okay? So once you have this here, which looks like a filled in 8, I'm just going to make the nose, this is the nose, this part up here. So I'm going to make that slightly more pointed, okay? So instead of it being round, I started with round, and then I can make this kind of like a rounded still, but slightly pointed for the nose, okay? And I'm going to take, so if you have your little detail brush, you can definitely use that. If you only have the flat brush, that's okay. You're just going to use the sideways edge. And this is how we're going to do the legs and the feet. So you're going to take your brush and you're going to paint a line right next to the bottom of the circle you just drew. That's going to be a nice little angled. So this is the booty. Okay, and you're going to do a line here and a line here that matches on the other side. And this is going to be the thighs or the hindquarters of your frog. Okay? And then you're going to draw or paint another angled line to make that look like a V. Okay? So this makes this the thigh and this is the knee. So you're going to do 2 angled lines coming down, and I'll highlight these so you can see them a little bit better in a second. But here, so let me highlight this. So you can take a little bit of black if you want to, just to help define this. So I'm just going to show you guys what that looks like. Anyway, so there's the legs, and then in order to make the feet, you're going to take that black paint and you're going to do two lines. So we're going to go 1, so you start from the outer edge and pull in 1, 2. Okay, 1, 2. Okay, so we made our circle here. We made a smaller circle here, and we slightly rounded the nose here. Okay, we painted a line on the bottom of this big circle at a slant, and then we painted another one over here. Then we painted an angled line here and here so that we made this the thigh and the knee. Okay, so there's a slight space between them to make them look like upside down V's. Okay, and then we painted the toes by pulling away and in to the bottom of that line on both sides. So 1, 2 for the toes. Okay, and the arms are just as easy. You're going to paint those in at the space between where the head and the body meet. So see, I can just do a curved line here, and see it's meeting just at that space right there. And then I can do another one on this side over here. And what we're going to do is you're going to have 3 fingers and a thumb for this frog. So you're going to go 1, 2, 3. Is that hard to see? And just a tiny little thumb. Okay, so I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, and then a tiny little thumb. Okay, and so that's the basis of your frog. And then if you want to create a little drop shadow so that it looks like your frog is sitting on the stone, definitely having a detail brush does make it easier. But if you take black paint and then you run it just along the right side of everything on the frog, so see if I have line here and I run a little black here, along the edge of the toe right there, along the side of the body right there, along the side of the arm, only on the right side. So we're not outlining everything, we're only doing along the outside. And if your lines are a little bit thicker than mine, that's okay. But I like to start thin and then gradually make them thicker. And it's easier too if you do this when the paint obviously is more dry. That way you don't run into the risk of blending the colors together. But yeah, so I'm doing a drop shadow by doing black on the right side of all of my details. So that means if there's a thumb, if I have the head, And then when you make a drop shadow too, see, it doesn't start all the way at the top. I start it a little bit lower. All right, hopefully this is not confusing and everybody's able to follow along okay. And again, you can also practice on paper beforehand if you're nervous about creating this part. So there's my froggy drop shadow, and if the drop shadow got a little crazy and you need to adjust it, like I said, just wait for that paint to dry, and it's very, very easy to fix and paint over and make an adjustment. See, if I need to come back in, I can wait for that to dry and I can just blend over the top. So don't worry if you made a boo-boo. And then you can play. You can add little eyes to the frog. You can, add little spots to it. So what I did in the original painting is I made little eyes, but I put them on the sides. So they were on this. So I took black paint. See, I put a little black eye on one side, a little black eye on the other side, or a little bit here, or you can make it on the body a little bit. So it's, there we go. Okay, and then you can use the handle of your paintbrush, not the bristles. Let me paint this eye in a little bit more. So I did one on the side of the face and one a little bit on the inside, so it looks like it's kind of turned. And then I took the handle of my paintbrush just to add a little sparkle to the eye. Okay, and then you can take yellow and add little spots to the body, or you can add, here, let's see. I'm going to add some white streaks first. So if you wanted to add a little texture to the body, you can, take a little bit of white or a lighter green, and you can kind of blend it around. Or I like to give the frog little eyebrows, do little dents like that, and then take yellow paint and then create some little polka dots on the back. So and if it's not blending well or it's blending too much, it's because, remember, your paint is really dry, and so you want to make sure that you're letting the paint dry and then coming back in or thinning it out and making your adjustments to your other things. And so if you need more of a contrast on your toes and on your feet and stuff, you can use yellow or a lighter green to come in and just touch up along the upper edge of the legs or the toes. Just play and experiment. So when I'm doing this, because this is a smaller detail, obviously I'm not needing as much paint because it's a smaller object. So make sure that when you are dipping your brush into the paint, that you are wiping it off so that you have just a tiny little bit to work with, because it's much easier to paint and build up the layers with a little bit than it is to put on a lot of paint and then have to figure out what to do with all the paint when you have too much, okay? But yeah, there's my little frog. What do you guys think? All right, so I'm gonna add some more ferns, and while you guys are working on those details, I will hang out and paint ferns, and if you have additional questions, you can definitely ask me some questions. I am here for you. So what we have changed the schedule to, if you guys had fun and you want to paint and you weren't able to do it, but you want to next week, is we've been pretty much doing every Wednesday afternoon at 4 o'clock Pacific Standard Daylight Time. So the reason why I did that is for my peeps on the East Coast, so you don't have to stay up too late. If you want to watch the replay, you can come back in and watch the replay. I save it in the discussion of the event. I don't post it. I mean, it should be in the comments on my page, but it might be harder to find because I post a lot of stuff, and so it's easier usually just to go to the event that you're interested in painting and then finding the video there. And if you don't find the video of something that you want to paint, like I said, check out my Patreon account, because you can definitely find everything that you want there, or you can message me for details. I'm also doing private lessons or remote lessons for people, and so yeah. What do we think? So see, I just used like how that little bit of white, if you put a little bit of smear of white on there, it makes it kind of look shiny. And when I add the white in, I don't do it directly on the edge. I do it just like a little bit in from the edge, so that it gives it a little bit more of a glamour. So if you want your frog to look more shiny, you can definitely add a few little white little lines. All right, I'm gonna add a few more ferns, and then we're gonna call this good. So see, I'm gonna be different than the original, and I'm gonna do one on the side here or something. So I hope you guys have enjoyed yourself painting with me today. The world is a pretty heavy place right now, and our job as artists is to, make statements, but also to hopefully sometimes make that world a little bit lighter for you. And so I want to provide you guys a safe creative space where we can all get together peacefully and create some fun stuff, and hopefully learn some things, and also provide a little bit of a distraction to, remind ourselves of how things can be fun if we let them. But I hope everybody out there is being safe and, is able to get back to their lives the way that they want it to be. And remember that we're all in this together, right? We're all going through all this madness together. And so we got to stand together as a community and help each other out when we can. And so art is the way that I hopefully can reach some of you all. And so I hope that it's beneficial. And if you found value in this class and you want to make a contribution or a donation, I have posted a PayPal link in the description and on the ticket link. It is not necessary if you cannot do that, because I know a lot of people are still not working or are playing catch up from everything else. But if you do make a contribution, thank you so much. I appreciate that. That's what's been helping me and my family get through, since I'm not able to do all the public events that I normally do. And so I just want to say I appreciate you and the community that we have created here. And if you run out of supplies or you're not able to get supplies, contact me and reach out if you live in Kitsap County, because I can help you out with art supplies. I've got canvases, I've got extra brushes, pencils, and paints, and those paint kits are only $15, and they include everything that you need, and then you just need to tune in to the videos when I post them. And if you were not painting and you were just watching for entertainment value, I hope that we were able to please your eye palette for the evening, and that you at least enjoyed what you were seeing if you did not enjoy the sound of my voice. I am no Bob Ross, guys, so as far as relaxing, tones, I don't know if I can master that, but I just want to say thank you so much, guys. I can't wait to see your paintings. I look forward to painting with you guys again. Tune in next Wednesday at 4 o'clock. And if you have additional questions, feel free to send those to me via message. Check out Rembrandt Illustrations Facebook page. Check out my Patreon link so you can get one-on-one consultations or free art or monthly postcards. I appreciate you guys. Appreciate and take care of each other, and keep creating. Spread art and not germs. Have a good night. Thank you.